Welcome back to a new episode of the Bees and Honey podcast. Today we're having an unscripted discussion with Italian artist Alessandro Del Pero, who has been visiting New York for a few weeks to support his artist friend Paolo Pelosini, whose solo show was at HG Contemporary. Good luck and have a great week. What I love about Anchor is that it's given me creative control of my own material. I was approached by a big company to do a podcast about the art world, and I didn't want to sign over all rights to them. Anchor has allowed me to make this podcast and to keep creative control as well as financial control in terms of advertising. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place for free. You can use it on your phone or your computer. There are tools that help you to upload your recordings that you've done separately or on the app. They'll distribute it for you as well, which again, I couldn't wrap my mind around distribution, and they have it all there for you in one place: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and many more. You can easily make money from it as well. They help you advertise. As you can see right now, I'm getting my first ad out through Anchor. And all you have to do is download the app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Good luck with your podcast and getting your voice out there and owning your content. So today we're sitting with artist Alessandro. You can tell us your name and
Alessandro Del Pero.
Alessandro Del Pero.
Yes.
And you're from what part of Italy?
I'm from Bolzano, Italy, up in the north.
Up in the north.
Yeah, the region nearby Austria. Yeah.
Near to Austria. So tell us about how you got here to New York, because I remember the first time I met you, you weren't speaking that much English. Maybe you were hiding it.
I'm still very bad at it, so I apologize previously. I will try to do my best.
No, well, I think you've really done a great job assimilating into our Western culture, except that now you decided you're going to go back to Italy.
Back.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So now you're working out of which town or which village in Northern
Now
Italy?
I live in Chienese, which is a very, very small village in a beautiful valley nearby. The capital there is Brunico, and it's like 1 hour from my hometown, Bolzano.
Mm-hmm. And how did you end up there in Chienese?
Because my girlfriend lives there, and so the idea was to move together, stay together, and see how it's gonna work actually.
So this girlfriend must be good for work then, because
she is.
Well, that's half the battle won right there. To meet a good partner.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Who's supporting?
She's supporting me a lot. So that's very important, psychologically.
Right, and I've seen some of the new work recently, and I know she was in a few of the paintings as well as the subject matter.
Yes, I made some portraits of her in the years. Yeah.
Yes. Well, tell us about the portraits, how those work, and who you paint. And I mean, you've done a few over the years. Some of them are mythical creatures, mythical people.
Yes, some of them they are. Well, I started, let's say, painting self-portraits. Actually, that's also the way I started actually painting somehow. And usually when I do a portrait, I have to feel something, some connection with the subject somehow. And in some cases are, masters from the past, or some friends, some people I know very well, or that somehow they came across myself or my work, and so and I feel that I like to try to do their portrait.
Right.
And the portrait is a very important part, in my opinion, maybe the highest point for a painter somehow, the biggest challenge, because if you think about the history of portraiture, is the longest somehow, and so much has been done, and it's very difficult to try to find your own way and to do something original somehow. Yeah. Yes,
well, I think that's a good point, especially now at this time in art history when so much is technological, to actually get back to the human aspect of painting. So I know you did, for example, Michael Jackson. I know you did Scott Gilles.
Gil Scott Aaron.
Gil Scott
I was
Aaron.
listening to him right now. So
Oh, you were? Exactly. So that's the connection. And I
Yeah.
know you did also Van Gogh.
I did a Van Gogh, yes. Yes. I was impressed by his self-portraits, of course. So I used one of them, and I tried to imagine himself standing in front of me in my studio. So trying to get him back to life somehow. You know,
Wow.
and that was the intention. But of course, very ambitious. I don't
Wow.
know if I made it, but
Well,
I tried. So
that's fascinating.
that was the goal.
Well, from my humble opinion, it seemed to work. I think he looked very much alive in the portrait that I saw of yours that you did. And you know, I think I mentioned in the past, you even resemble him a little bit. From time to time, I think, you know, in the right light, you could look like him.
Yeah,
But
they used to tell me that. Yeah.
they used to tell you that, right? Well, who knows? Maybe, you know, I think
Maybe
when
there is a connection. You know.
we don't know it between time
Yeah,
and space,
yeah.
we can only feel.
Exactly.
And if we talk about these things with the average rational person, you know, we wouldn't be having a discussion, really, because it doesn't fit into
No.
the discourse of rationality.
No.
And thank God it doesn't.
Exactly.
I was looking at a movie yesterday, Ford versus Ferrari. And the race car driver, you know, he's not a visual artist, but when you talk about using tools or using your hands or creating something, this guy, you know, he created a racing car. It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And he was an artist. He could use
He's a
that.
creator.
He was a
somehow,
creator.
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And he
Yes,
basically had this fight between the creators and the men in the suits. Like he called them that, the men in suits.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing in the art world, you know. We have the creators and we have the men in suits.
Exactly. The businessman, you know,
Yeah.
and the person, because there's the artist, there's the person behind the artist. You know, it's not. I mean, I would say in my case, you know, I try to separate the things, even though it's very complicated. But
Yes.
sometimes you're affected by personal things, and you should keep them out from what you do as an artist.
That's perhaps true too, yes. That's perhaps true too.
But sometimes, most of the time, it's very difficult. And even though it's not something you control, you see that your personal life is kind of affecting your work. So that's a natural process.
Yes, yes. Well, tell us a little bit about how your work evolved. I mean, I know you said you started with portraits, self-portraits, and then what happened after that? Like, what was the next phase that you could define in your own work? What came after the portraits?
Well, different things. I would say that everything is kind of a self-portrait, everything I do, even though it's not a portrait. And but you know, since when I started, my obsession was with the light somehow. I don't know how to explain this, but I was feeling that somehow I had to paint light, and most of the time the subject is just a pretest to develop this element, which is light.
Oh.
And so I came up with different paintings, and they started to become bigger. Was reproducing somehow my working space. So the first paintings, that the big size paintings, they were basically my studio, and something was happening there. And then with time and experience, the subject changed, and but the main focus is always this thing with the light, with some light. I still have to figure it out. What is it, and so I think that would be my route, my trip.
Yes. Well, I'll start with the work that I first saw when you were in New York, I guess 5 years ago or something like that.
Yes,
And it was those Shadow Men pieces where there's the self-portrait of you in this sort of psychological space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important pieces I've done for myself, because from there everything started somehow. That was my actual first, big painting, we would say. And yes, it's still in a process. I'm trying to learn, to improve, of course, and try to catch this light somehow.
And then what happened after that? Because you went into this sort of semi-abstract renditions of bodies sort of dissolving, or landscapes sort of dissolving, trees, for example.
Yes. Well, that was a few years ago here in New York. I was living in Harlem, in a very bizarre place, I would say. So surrounded by struggling people, and I think that somehow that element, that presence, around me, and the idea I've always had, about nowadays identities we have, or we don't. So I think we live in an era where people have a lack of identity somehow. So the idea was to try to construct a figure that somehow pretends to be a person, pretends to be someone. And I ended up doing these sculptures somehow. So I was imagining myself being a sculptor and sculpting actually, but I was painting.
Right.
So that was the process.
And then what about those sort of semi-religious ones that have this torso that's dismembered torso?
Yeah.
I mean,
but that comes from the crucifixion, which is, it's not about the religion itself. It's not that my work is related to that, but it's part of the tradition of painting. And the crucifixion is something that basically started with but we know about classical art, modern art, and everything. It's a subject, an icon. So the goal was to deal with something iconic and try to do it my way.
Right.
And especially in Italy, you grow up and where I live, you walk around and in the mountains, you have beautiful paths and stuff. You can walk, and you see those crosses everywhere. So it's an image that it's always been there somehow.
Yes.
So I wanted to deal with at some point.
Right.
And I will still do it. I'm sure.
Yes. And what about? I can't remember. You went away at some point, and then you were burning these styrofoam figures into the...
Yeah, this is, I would say, the most recent part of the work. So a couple of years ago I started working with these panels. That it's also something I've been always surrounded by for some reason.
Yeah.
And I was very intrigued by the material, the thing. So I tried to see that if there was some potential. And I painted some figures and started cutting out and burning up. So the last part of the process was to put those figures into the paintings and see what's going on. If it works, if not, I'm still trying to figure it out. But yeah, it's something that I still see that I have to push it. Somehow,
right. And then the new work that you showed recently in the solo exhibition in New York, the death of abstraction, or the death of the end of abstraction, or whatever you want to call it. What about those still lifes? I guess they're also part of art historical references.
Absolutely, yeah. The still life is another, cliche, let's say. And they may look very different from the rest of my body of work, but they're still part of the same, same environment, same world. But in this case, it's like this light I was talking about, it turned completely off. And just a couple of spots, very strong spots, survived. And they do something in the space, something is going on. And all you see, it's illuminated by the consequence of this light.
Right.
So there was this idea about representing, in this case, the death of abstraction, like the funeral somehow.
Right.
And but also to deal with the still life in a different way and trying to do it my way. And
yes.
Different things together.
Yeah.
But the main thing still is always the light.
The light, or the lack thereof, or in the dark space, the light showing up.
And the consequence of it.
And then what have you been working on recently? I know you did the residency. What's the name of the lake in Austria?
Art residency, and it was in Milchstattersee, which is a beautiful lake in Carinthia in Austria. And it was a very beautiful experience because I had a beautiful and huge studio and in a beautiful environment, and I've been working, let's say, very well. I've been working a lot, and it was a very productive experience, let's say,
Right, and what is that work looking like? Because I remember you sending one or two, but I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, they were related to the history of the lake. It was actually the first time that I tried to do something related to, a new situation, let's say.
Right.
So I tried, Milchstattersee means 1,000 statues lake.
Oh, wow.
And the story is that when the Romans moved there, they thrown into the lake all the pagan statues that were part of the local culture, just to
get rid of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the idea was to see some of these sculptures coming back from the water and see them, floating in the sky like this, but at night they're all like night views.
Yeah, pagan sculptures rising out of the
exactly.
water. Oh yeah, that sounds like fascinating work too. And then when you leave here, you're going back to Italy. What are you planning for the next few months or?
To work hard in the studio, in producing and keep, working on this series I'm working on right now.
Right.
And then we'll see, but the main thing is always to spend my time on front of the canvas and try to
do as much work as possible. Yeah. And then do you have a gallery in Italy right now? I know you did a show recently, about a few years ago maybe.
It was last year, 2018.
2018.
No, I don't have a gallery that represents my work right now in Europe in general. And but this space was run by the Künstlerbund, which is like the historical artist league somehow, local. And they're doing pretty well. They have a space which is a gallery, and they have a very nice program, and they do a lot, especially for local artists over there.
Right. And what about the gallery in Milan? Did you have something in the gallery in Milan a little while ago?
No. That was like a private view in a private collection. Yes.
Oh, okay. And then I know you had something in Dusseldorf a while back with some people. Was it a group show or a solo show?
Yeah, no, it was a solo show back in 2014. And in a gallery in Dusseldorf, Gallerie. But apparently they are doing different things now, so they still have to figure out how
their own programming. So basically you are free and clear, as they say. Yeah. That's good, and in some ways it's challenging, but I think in this day and age, there are a lot of opportunities that come up for artists who do not have representation. For example, I was speaking to a young guy, I don't know, he just graduated from Harvard or something, and he was coming up with an idea that is already done with people paying a monthly subscription, and then if they like a work of art, they have it for a month or two, and then they decide if they want to pay the full price for the art, or if they swap it out for something else they'd like to try or something like that. I'm curious
like a rental service.
He doesn't like the word rental, because I said rental as well in the conversation.
But it is.
And he was like, we prefer to say subscription. But would you be open to a concept like that, for example? I don't know.
Well, it might be interesting. Depends always on where and what kind of people will be interested in this, and because once one person buys your work, then the work has another life. You can control it. So this is like I don't know. It's like a middle way to something
to gauge interest.
Yeah.
Well, the price points that he would be talking about for this monthly subscription are much less than if you actually bought the work. So I honestly don't know how it would work out.
Exactly, I don't know.
But what you mentioned just now in terms of the work taking on a new life when it goes to another owner, I think that is a very interesting dynamic that happens, because I see it sometimes even with work that I myself buy. I don't think many art dealers have a qualm when they buy something for, let's say, 10,000, and then in a few years' time they're selling it for 30. That's all theirs. The artist doesn't see any of it.
Yeah, you can control that. This is what the market is based on, basically. I would say it's all about dealing. Has nothing to do with the artist itself, I would say. It's all marketing, and I think we should put like how do you say, like not a credit,
a disclaimer, a note. Where?
No, but I know that some artists do that. Some big name they do. For every resale, they have
a percentage, residuals.
That would be interesting, I think.
I think it would be interesting, especially when there are times.
If you think about music and what they do with the rights,
royalties,
the kind of rights, royalties.
Yeah.
At some point, it should happen.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, especially when artists have a hot moment where they're selling, and then afterwards, perhaps they're not selling so much anymore. Exactly. And they're still hungry. They still need.
Yeah, and some people are still making money on their work, so by reselling. There's
something else that came to mind as you spoke about that whole dynamic of resales and stuff like that. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. I don't like to have, see, this is why I come up with questions usually before. But
Right.
just so the audience knows, I've known Alessandro probably as long as I know any other artist, but I was lazy because I know him so well to write some questions, and now we're just thinking
Much better
about...
to improvise, you know.
Well, yeah, you're being party to an unfiltered conversation, sort of. In terms of collectors and buying your work and stuff like that, oh, this is what I was going to ask. Because one young artist who I've worked with in the past, he basically said to me the other day, how do we get some of my work into auctions? And I was like, I'm like, you want to jump out of the studio and just go straight into auctions?
Exactly.
I told him, you know, it's more interesting to for now concentrate on getting your work in good collections. Because the auctions will take care of themselves. I mean,
to be honest, it's something I don't really know about. You know, so I'm not into that much, so I don't know. But of course, sounds like something too rushy, kind of. You know.
Well, it's basically going back to what you said about supply and demand. You know, the auctions start working for some artists when there's just not enough on the primary market for all the people who supposedly want it. I mean, I won't name any of the artists who were in the recent auctions here who are young and relatively emerging artists, but just because it's on auction doesn't mean anything. Next year it could not be on auction. Next year it could not even sell for the price that it was on auction.
Yeah,
you know?
It's difficult to deal and control these things.
Exactly.
You may think, no, it would be good to do that, but then it's very relative. You never know.
Yeah, that's the word, control. It's hard to control this sort of thing. But again, going back into the people buying your art and stuff like that, I think more important than the auctions is the building of relationships with these people.
With collectors. Yes,
who actually have an interest in supporting your work. Or with dealers, or with gallerists. I mean,
But I think that's more difficult somehow. Depends on who you're gonna work with, you know. But some galleries, they don't even like to tell you who they sell a piece to because they're afraid they're gonna steal their, which is a very stupid and unsecure thing, you know, to the very that shows that you're a very insecure person.
Well, I think again it's part of the control mechanism. Like if they were to tell you, what is the use of them being there? I guess.
I mean, you never know. You would like to know where your works end up because you never know in the future you may need it. It's important. I think it's a professional thing to do and to keep all the records. If you don't do it, you're just not professional, in my opinion. You're just a weak, scared person.
Well, a few years back, there was another artist, a German artist. I don't see much of his work around these days, but I mean, I think he's a great artist. And at the time, he was, you know, hot. Everybody wanted him. He was showing all over. You know, big collectors were buying 6, 8, 10, how many ever they could get. And then his gallery got into a little bit of a financial trouble. So they cut back on the amount of work that they were doing for these artists. And at one point he had a show with them and he came into the gallery and he said, what exactly am I giving you guys a percentage for? Look, I just sold that piece on the wall over there.
Exactly, it was right.
He's completely crazy, completely out of line. And, you know, I have to check if he's still working with this gallery. But in some ways, I mean, I know that that's how you guys feel sometimes too. Like, what the hell, you know?
Well, till now, I've been surviving by my personal collectors, I would say. So galleries didn't do that much for me.
Right.
So the guy might be right, you know, you never know.
Yeah. Well, I think if we consider how the art world is sort of being polarized in terms of all these artists at the top of the food chain and then very few in the middle, and I guess just this whole emerging scene, which I don't even know how it's supported these days, but it's interesting to think about how it will all play out in the next few years. Because if there are no small galleries for the big galleries to find talent from, what is going to happen?
They should start moving their ass more than what they're doing. You know, nowadays it's all about having an easy life. So they they created all these artist residencies where, you know, these poor guys, they have to go there like chicken to be fed, because the curator has to have an easy life. You go there, you choose one of them, and same the galleries, and that's why also the
like a chicken factory.
Yeah, exactly. It is. All these big factories, very cool. You have to be there because it's part of what they're telling you to do in order to be an artist. How can you find an artist in there if someone is gonna do what is told to do? That's not an artist. That can't be. It's very difficult.
Well, that's interesting because.
But it can be a pop artist. That for pop culture is gonna work very well.
Well, that's what one collector said on a past interview here. He was like, this is not art. How can they have the balls to even call this art or call themselves patrons or whatever?
Their business, they do very good business with these poor people called artists, and they want to be in there because they have to, and they pay a big amount of money in order to be part of the scene.
Right.
But that's not even a scene, an artist scene. It's just a market scene.
Right. Well, I was speaking to another dealer as well, and I have a very strange relationship with him. We have a good exchange most times, and then sometimes not such a good exchange. But basically, I said to him, which is basically what we were just saying a little while ago, that from now on, I'm not going to give him any more information about what's happening because, like you said, he's just lazy, sitting in his office, like selling multi-million-dollar works, not really with feet on the ground. The people who are his quote-unquote directors are also like, just part of the establishment. They have no idea what's going on the ground. None. And I'm like, you know what, unless you start putting me on the payroll, I'm not giving you any more information about what's happening out there because you and your guys aren't doing anything. You're not doing the work. But they're reaping all the benefits, financial benefits. So anyways, I'm not...
The art world is just a big market. It's nothing. Very hard to find a situation where you actually talk art seriously. Especially here, I would say that's one of the things that impressed me the most through the years. Mm-hmm. That it's all about money and producing stuff that had to be sold. That's it.
Well, that's the sad truth of the economy, or what do you want to call it, capitalism. Yeah. If you don't produce, you can't survive.
No, it's always been like that. I mean, art has always been produced and also it's always been sold. But nowadays, it looks like there are artists everywhere, but they're just people that produce stuff to be sold. Art, in my opinion, is definitely something else.
Well, that's where
and very rare. It's impossible. How many artists are here in New York? If you think about it, are they all real artists? You think?
Well, I think if they've been doing this for a long time and they have some modicum of success and they don't need to worry about paying the bills, they can produce art or they can make whatever they want to make and call it art. But I mean, that's basically what the other collector was saying as well too, that it's very difficult in these places to find anything. That's why he goes out. Let's say to the countryside where you are to find some art, or the countryside, wherever.
I think what's going on in the big cities, like New York, New York is the first one, they will become just financial district, in my opinion, or big malls. So you come here to sell and buy, to buy culture, to consume culture, but not to produce culture. So I think that the future of culture will be in the countryside. I mean, the small realities where people can afford make a living and be free to produce and do good stuff.
Yeah.
You can do it in here any longer. So.
Yeah.
But you have to come here or not. But you come here to make some money and to buy
promote
and to
yourself.
sell. In a commercial way.
Yeah. Well, I hope it eventually serves some purpose because as it is, it's just really boring to be here all the time without this source of creativity that we mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think, we have to give some curators some kudos too, because there are a few that still go out and really search for things. I think there are some people really doing the work, not just
sure.
But I don't know. I don't know their names. I mean, I don't know who they are, but I'm sure they exist.
No, they have to be somewhere.
But you have to think too that these people also have to go and do the work with all the funders or whatever you call these people to get the money to support the institutions where they work in order to pay for the exhibitions that must go into these spaces. So it's anyway.
But it became so big, you know, this thing about the contemporary art world, that if you are not good at nothing, if you're good at nothing in life, you have no skills, you should try to find a job in the art world. Because now you can.
Well, it's funny that you said that, because actually
you don't need to have any special ability or nothing.
Yeah.
You just do what you're told to, you know, and you will figure it out.
Yeah.
You can do that with music or you know, architecture. You have to study. It's a hard process, or any other profession needs some basis.
Yes.
In the art, you're very free to do whatever you want, and it's amazing. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is probably the good thing and the bad thing about it. I remember one older art dealer telling me the reason he started his own business is because nobody would hire him. So in a way, you're right.
That's a good point.
But it's you know, perhaps that's the good thing about America, even though there's all this
No, but this is
pressure.
in general. I'm not talking about America in this case. It's everywhere like that. Yeah. I'm talking about the art world in general, which looks the same everywhere, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, here it's very extreme. Here in New York, it's very, very too commercial, too extreme, too money focused.
Yeah.
But you know, nowadays it's very difficult to find a special or different place. At the end, they end up doing the same things and trying to be New York everywhere.
Yes. Well, I think we have spent enough time having a conversation for people to enjoy. Hopefully they got some gems out of all of this. And I hope to see what your new work is going to be like, and to do more stuff with you in the future. Commercial or non-commercial, we'll see.
No, especially commercial. We have to be very business oriented.
Yeah. No, I actually, now that you mentioned that, I remember what you said last time when I asked you about a certain artist, and you were like, you want my real reaction or you want my politically correct reaction?
Now I have to do the politically correct.
Yeah, if we want to sell, we got it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Nice, sweet, you know, well dressed, and I will do my job.
And just say what the person wants to hear.
Exactly, that's the best way.
Oh my God, Jesus. Well, I hope we can at least be honest when we're in the studio or in the bedroom, as the case may be. You know, somebody's got to put the mask down sometime.
You never know.
Anyway, you never know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, and I hope you have a good trip back, and we'll keep an eye out for your new work.
Absolutely, I'll keep you posted, and thank you again for having me here.
Yeah, and I hope New York City will be good to you again.
I'm sure. I hope so, but I'm sure.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye, take care.